and welcome to APICS Extra Live, Leading Alignment in End-to-End Supply Chains with Ron Crabtree, CPIM, Score P. My name is Jennifer Storelli, Associate Editor at APICS. Before we begin, I'd like to make a few announcements. At the end of the presentation, we'll save time for a question and answer session. Please hold your questions for this Q&A session until the end of the presentation. We will be inviting you to use the questions box on your GoToWebinar toolbar for some audience participation questions throughout the presentation, and we do not want your questions to get lost in the shuffle. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's broadcast, please call GoToWebinar Tech Support at 1-805-617-7000. Again, that's 1-805-617-7000. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on YouTube early next week. We will email you a link to the recording once it is available. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Ron Crabtree is Chief Executive Officer of MetaOps, a master meta expert and organizational transformation architect. He is the author or co-author of 5 books about operational excellence, the online magazine at metaopsmagazine.com, and the Lean Culture Department in APICS Magazine, which is available in print, online, and through the APICS Magazine tablet app. Ron also teaches, consults, and of course presents. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Ron Crabtree. Ron, you may begin.
Thank you. A scary but true reality is that 8 or 9 organizations out of 10 fail to get the results they really should from supply chain initiatives that are driven or lined up to drive real results in organizations. And it kind of begs the question, the root of that is that A, people aren't smart enough to learn the methods, the techniques, the technical aspects of what we need to accomplish, or would it be B, we require people to cooperate, right, get along with and support what we're trying to do. They need to go along with the kinds of changes we need to make happen. And having asked this question of thousands of professionals around the world in every setting in one form or another, it's pretty broad agreement that it's always going to be B, getting people to go along with, support and align with what we're trying to do is really one of the biggest challenges we run into. More than 10 years ago, it kind of hit me between the eyes that this is a big problem in most organizations where I was training people in technical skills to implement major supply chain improvement programs. And technically, people were doing fine, but I noticed a pattern, right? Most of them began to really struggle running projects on their own and getting things done. The projects I was running would go fine, and I'd be developing someone to hand it off to. But then as we handed off and got other folks to take things on and continue on with those initiatives, I noticed things would not go quite so well, and it really came home to me that success is really about an 80% people problem and not so much a technical problem. With more than 20,000 hours in front of groups large and small in every setting you can imagine, I began to recognize that the facilitation skills I was using really made a huge difference. So for the last 10 years, I've been developing and refining an inventory of all those great facilitation techniques I've learned and practiced, and I've been turning them into training and coaching for professionals like you. At the APICS conference last September, I presented how this ties into this leading alignment in end-to-end supply chain. And as part of that, I described the 33 habits that the best facilitators and leaders within supply chain utilize to get that alignment that you need and having people go along with and support the changes you're going to make. Which brings us to the topic of this webinar, getting results from online meetings. And this is an area, by the way, that I did not have an opportunity to touch on as part of the APICS conference presentation. So we're literally going to cover some new ground here for the first time with an APICS audience. What this is about is what does it take to make us all as leaders more effective in facilitating and leading virtual meetings and working sessions that span our supply chains, which, whether we like it or not, is the #1 way most of us have that we use to plan, lead, and deliver results in supply chains in working with people today. Most of what I've learned about masterful facilitation, albeit very painfully at times, can in fact be leveraged, at least partly, in an online forum. And my promise here is to do the very best I can here in the next 45 minutes or so to convey to you as much as I as I can about this topic and arm you with some tools and methods you can use going forward. So what's at stake? Well, the fact is the deck is really stacked against us when it comes to working in an online forum to get alignment and moving things forward in our supply chain with people. I'm going to talk more about that deck here in a little bit. And underneath that, there's three major things that have been out there in published works around the things that people hate the most about online meetings. Now, I'm going to share with you how you can begin to prevent those. I'm going to introduce, if you will, 22 habits of the master online facilitators that you can leverage as well. I'll share with you some of those techniques that are best used to maintain focus and attention. Make sure we have that full participation of people every step of the way as we engage with them. And a really powerful technique called using enrolling questions to really hook people into what we're doing. It's kind of those three killer techniques that we can use to really make a difference. But before we get there, I'm going to have a quick little interaction here with the audience. I want to make sure we all understand how to use the technology. And we're going to practice the raising of hand tool. So in your little panel, you'll notice at the very top, right where your names are listed, so you need to go to where it says attendees and pop that open. You see where your name is, and you're going to see there's a little hand icon. And if you could kindly hit that hand icon to raise your hand, I'd appreciate that. If everybody could attempt to do that now. In there, okay, I see hands beginning to pop up. Keep going. Raise those hands. Let's make sure we understand how to use the technology, because I'm going to ask a couple of questions here later on and see if folks are willing to comment about a couple of things. Please use the hand raise tool. I don't see enough participants there yet. A little concerned here, we're not getting there, so let's keep practicing. Okay. All right, I see close to 50% of folks are there. Okay, what I can do now is click their hand again to put your hand down, right, to lower the hand. So if you raise your hand, please lower the hand now. All right, I see most of us have done that. Awesome. So we're learning the technology, checking up on us. Okay, we're doing well. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is there's a little pop-out where you see this little negative sign here next where it says questions. I need you to click on that, the plus to open that up. And then you're going to see there's a little box you can type into for question. And what I'd like everybody to do now is just type in there and hit enter. Just type in there and say, got it. Right, G-O-T, it, right, I-T. Everybody just type got it in the question box. Just hit enter, and I just want to make sure enough of us are hitting that. Okay, I'm scrolling through here. Okay, we're getting some good traffic here. Got it, got it, got it, got it. Yeah, we're getting the hang of it. Awesome. We're going to use this several times throughout our session today because I'm definitely looking for some feedback, some audience participation as we go. Excellent. In that case, I think we're ready to move on. Good job. So now I've got a question, and I'm actually going to ask you to use that question tool and see who can answer this first question. This is generally published information out there that 67% of executives say meetings are a complete what? Who can fill in the blank? Using that question tool very quickly, type in something starting with the word W that we think executives may claim is the number one thing they would say that meetings are a complete what? So I'm scrolling down now. Okay, waste of time, waste of time. Absolutely. So let's move on now. This one's a little harder. The number one source of waste brainstormed by many organizations, particularly in supply chain groups, teams of supply chain members, you know, folks that work together in groups, and we get together and we talk about the number one thing that makes them crazy about working in their company and the thing that wastes their time. It starts with the letter M. Who can guess what that word would be? They say the number one source of waste is what? Starts with an M. Let's see who's got that. I'm scrolling down. Meetings, 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 management. I like that, management. Management typically drives our behaviors. So what I was fishing for was meetings, and you're absolutely right. I'm scrolling down here. Most of you are nailing that. And you know, if you're in a manufacturing setting where you're producing a product out on the shop floor, motion absolutely can be a huge source of waste. Manpower can be a source of waste, but most of you are saying meetings. Okay, good job with that. Awesome. So that brings us on now, right? So I remember I talked about the deck being stacked against us. And I'm going to ask you to use this question tool here in a little bit, but I want to kind of give you some context first around why that deck is stacked against us. Some of the fatal flaws that we experience, and there's an APICS article out there on the fatal flaws of online meeting success, and we get a lot of insights about what we're challenged with. And the first is it's really hard to remember anything by just hearing the words. And without the visual cues that we get in a live meeting where we can see each other and hear the nuances of voices and look at body posture, etc., our brains don't pick up things quite so well. The next thing that is suggested is that, the average attention span of adults is getting shorter and shorter, which makes me, the good old days, we used to say it was 20 minutes was about the maximum attention span, but I've heard a lot of professionals out there saying it's down to 10 minutes now, particularly in an online forum, that 10 minutes is about all you're going to get before you really lose people quickly. So that begs the question is, how long is our average online meeting? And I know they're a lot longer than 10 minutes. Then we have, what about the visible social cues that we're not getting in that in-person meeting that tells you as the facilitator that people are puzzled, lost. Maybe they're interested, or maybe they're bored out of their skull. They just want to pound their heads on the table. You just don't have those visual clues to help us. The other issue is because we're only using words and we can't have body behavior and looking for visual feedback to see we're getting through can create all kinds of misunderstandings. For example, if you're sitting there as a facilitator and online and you're hearing silence to something you've just said, or silence to something else somebody else said, does that mean everybody's in rapt agreement? Could it be they're sitting there with their mouths hanging open in horror, right? Just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I heard that. Or maybe they're all staring at the ceiling or at their iPad or whatever, and everybody's tuned out. When silence doesn't mean a thing in terms of whether you're being successful. And then finally, that fifth issue, it's really hard to bond in an online forum because you're just not there. People naturally react in a face-to-face interaction with all the senses in play. They want to pull together and really get things done. This is a lot harder to do, and it's very much harder to get strong commitment and build trust. So I'd like to invite you to do now is use the question tool. What I'd like you to do is just type in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and your opinion of these 5 fatal flaws in your experience. Which of these is the most painful, the most flaw, the biggest flaw in online meetings? Type a number and just hit enter for me. I got a 3, 2, 3, 4. Taking a straw poll here. See if we got some general consensus. 2, 3, 1. Okay, I'm just kind of looking down through here, getting lots of clicks. All right. 1, 4, and 3, somebody ranked them. Cool. That's cool. I didn't want to make you work too hard, but that was cool. All right. Awesome. So we had quite a mix here, right? Different people with different perspectives saying which of these is really the biggest fatal flaw. And so here, and by the way, there's an article you can refer to for more about that. The 5 Fatal Flaws was published in Forbes back in 2012. It's pretty entertaining and some pretty good insights you can glean from that. So let's move on now to the classic things that people tend to hate most about online meetings. And this again is out on the internet, generally available, but it's pretty fun. And I didn't turn on the sound here for the drum roll, but we have, this whole thing about boring presenters, right, making us crazy. And then we have the issue with way too much information coming into play in our online meetings. We just get buried in it. And then finally, technology. And what I'd like you to do is use the question box again, only this time type the number of these 3 things. Which one of those do you hate most? And is there something else about online meetings that you hate, makes you crazy? Type the number, and if you can think of something, one more thing that just makes you crazy about online meetings. If you don't mind, just a number and one more thing that makes you crazy that's not on the list. Oops, here's a good one. The lack of interaction. Awesome, thank you. Distractions, yeah. Lots of agreements with 1 and 2. Reading the slides verbatim. Oh my goodness, you're stealing one of my cues. Taking too long to get things done. Awesome. 1, 2, 1, 2. Lack of participation, lack of direction, lack of clear objectives. Ones, right? Lots of ones, taking too long, can't scribble fast enough. There you go. Useless information. Ooh, that's a good one. That's evidence of poor preparation when you get useless information. Tons of text. Oh, I love it. Tons of text. Irrelevant questions. Poor sound quality. Awesome. Time differences. People coming in late. All kinds of good stuff here. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for participating there, because you're definitely you're hitting stuff here that I'm going to actually address as part of today's discussion. So let me do a quick time check here. Okay, we're right on the money here with our time, so good, thank you. All right, so what we need to do when we're running meetings of any kind, online meetings is even more critical, is move into what's called a change of state at least every, how long? And I gave you the answer to this earlier, right? About every 10 minutes. I would say in an online forum, 5 minutes is probably better, because you don't have the visual cues, you don't have things keeping you awake. But what's a change of state? A change of state is where you change in the flow of what's going on. So if you're going through statistics or figures, you stop and you check in with folks on what's going on. If you're going through a slide and talking about what's going on for more than 5 minutes and you don't pause to see if somebody's still alive out there, shame on you, but then you shift gears. You actually have a change of state where somebody else speaks. You go to a different topic. You look for feedback. You do a straw poll. You ask for a yes and a no. You move through using a rolling question, which I'll teach you more about, et cetera, right? So change of state, very important. Keep the energy up, because what happens is your energy drops very quickly, and the change of state brings the energy, the attention back to the highest possible level. And then we have to answer the questions to the venerable WIFMs, right? And I know 90% of you can answer that. It's the what's in it for me question. And the other thing is to make sure we have full participation. One of the great ways that I found to do that is to figure out how to have everybody have on a roll, and by association with that, no place to hide and go off and multitask. And then using this technique of enrolling questions, which I'm going to explain a little bit more about later. All right, so let's address this thing around too much information. First of all, don't do it. I mean, you just have to resist it. Get away from packing way too much into your agenda than you can possibly cover. It's really a case of less is more, and a lot less of information to present that stick and something actually happens is way more valuable than covering 99 things and nothing happens. The other thing that I found particularly good in an online forum is, keep it prompt, right? Keep the promise. We're going to start promptly and we're going to end promptly, so that people aren't going, oh my goodness, rolling their eyes and dragging their feet. They know we're going to get in and out of there. It's going to be crisp. People will really appreciate that. And if you have a company and an organization that's pretty sloppy about that, you'll start to stand out as somebody if they really want to attend your meetings, because you're going to keep it tight. And then, of course, you never, ever, 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 and somebody, I'm not going to make you fill in the blanks now. Somebody already said it. You never, ever read the slides, the R and the S here. You never, ever, ever read the slides. Never, ever, ever read the information you're showing on your screen. It's killing us. It's just killing us. You got to boil that down to highly salient information that is needed to get the point across or get the decision made and move on. And a really powerful technique that I've seen is what's called the power summary. And this is a terrific technique to create engagement. If by necessity you have a lot of information that you need to have understood or to get through in your meeting, maybe it's a good idea if you had somebody boil it all down for you and give the entire group a 90-second power summary of all this information you may have up on 1, 2, or 3 pages of information that you've shared ahead of time, or perhaps have slides on the screen, or looking at a document or whatever. Have people give assignments to different people to give power summaries about that critical salient information we need to make decisions, and use that and leverage it. Now, there's 3 big benefits to this, gang, I don't want you to miss. First of all, it greatly reduces the boredom of just listening to one person yap, which, by the way, would be you. It certainly gets other voices being heard. It increases the engagement for sure, and it definitely ups the energy quotient, because I now have a hand in, and I am an actual part of this meeting, the result we're trying to accomplish. I have responsibility and accountability to make something happen. So this power summaries technique is very powerful, and I didn't put that in there meaning you need to do it. Sure, you should, but to the degree you can engage others to help you do that, very, very powerful way to up the ante in your online meetings. All right, now I'm going to ask for people to use the question bar. Who can fill in this blank? And it's not typed here. Failing to plan is planning to what? And just use that question tool. Anybody can type it quickly. Failing to plan is planning to, oh yeah, it's coming through. You guys are nailing it. Planning to fail. Fail, fail, fail. And for those of you who have been, students of quality or process improvement, you probably heard of this thing called failure mode and effect analysis. And sometimes it's not a bad idea to take a step back when you're thinking about your initiative. Just think about what could fail, right? What could go wrong in our meetings, conveying this information, getting the agreement we're looking for, et cetera. Who are the stakeholders and their agendas? And maybe we should kind of have a little plan for failure, or excuse me, to prevent failure, right up front. So the rule of 7 Ps, that's a good one. I like that. The rule of 7 Ps, awesome. Thank you. The other thing that's really good is to come up with, some instructions for your newbies, maybe build a little extra time in your agenda for the very first online meeting with the group, right? Build in a little extra time just to do the technology thing with everybody, kind of like what we did here. Or maybe you could do a quick YouTube or a quick video recording on how to use the technology, or a frequently asked questions page for newbies joining your organization, suppliers, customers, whoever you're pulling in. This is a big deal in supply chain because we need to interact with different people, different countries, different companies, different agendas every day. And this is a kind of a neat little technique to help speed that up. The other thing that's good is to have a three-pronged attack, if you will, for how you're going to hold the meetings. And I like to have 3 mediums lined up in advance to support me in my online forum. For my company, I have 4 different technologies we use. We use GoToMeeting, and GoToWebinar is a product associated with GoToMeeting. We use a product called Join.me, which is pretty skinny, browser-based. We use Skype, particularly with organizations and internationally that allow Skype through the firewalls. And finally, we have the venerable phone landline, the conference line we can call into. For important meetings, I'll often have an open and running at the start 2 different screen sharing applications. Quite often, I'll have Join.me running in the background, and then we may be meeting in GoToMeeting, but I find out we've got bandwidth issues. Cisco's not going to play nice with certain people's computers. They can't get through their firewall today, blah, blah, blah. We can quickly toggle to a different tool like Join.me and keep things on track. The other thing you should do, of course, is always try to test these things in advance or ask your newbies to figure out which of these tools works best and give you some feedback. Always have the instructions in the agenda, right? In your agenda, you should have a little footnote, like, frequently asked questions, questions about technology. Go to the end of the agenda and you'll see there how to solve basic technology problems. The other thing that's good is always to pre-publish those agendas. Push those out in soft copy well in advance. It's kind of getting ahead of that planning for failure. And in that agenda, spell out what we're going to do if we have technology problems, if we run out of time, what our backup plan is. Put that right in your agenda and how you're going to tackle that. That way you can keep things moving. And then another technique, particularly in larger organizations where this is mission critical stuff, rescheduling this isn't an option, have a team member in the room or nearby that can take the newbies offline or people having technology problems and take it offline. Let somebody else deal with that technology issue while you continue forward with the meeting, which begs the notion that maybe you should always record the meetings too, and GoToMeeting in particular has great tools for recording the meetings as we go. We're doing on time? Yep, we're still on track. Let's move on. All right, here I have a quiz. Here's the quiz. There's 22 habits of the best facilitators in online forums. And there's 22 of these things listed here. I'm going to give you the next 90 seconds or so to just kind of look through this list and guesstimate of these 22 habits of the best facilitators in an online forum. How many of these do you think you've already seen in play in the first 22 minutes, 23 minutes of today's webinar? Take a swag at, scientific guess at how many of these 22 things you've already seen in play. I'm going to give you another 45 seconds to scan that, and then just type in a number when you're done. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take a sip of water and mute out. All right, awesome. So I saw a wide range of guesses. I had some folks thinking they've only seen a few. They've had some folks said, I saw all of them, all 22. Well, I'm not that good. I'd like to think I am, but I'm not. So the answer to the question is about 16 of these have come into play so far, and I kind of lighted out the ones that I didn't put in there, right? You've actually seen me using this enrolling questions technique. I'm going to explain that more as we go. You've seen this notion of visibly making things visible. In an online form, that's even harder to do than it is physically because you have limited space to do it. Learn by doing techniques, you know, that little opening thing where we had everybody practice raising hands and practice that gotcha thing, got it thing. That's a form of that right there, right? Less is more. You'll notice I'm not packing these slides with too much information. And I hope you didn't catch me reading any slides because then I'll have to kick myself. Managing the energy, right? Keeping our focus there, making sure we're staying on our purpose. I'm using stories, metaphors, analogies. We certainly celebrated a few wins here because I said thank you several times. And then support learning, right? Focus on continually moving forward. You actually saw me, without knowing it, using Socratic questioning, you know, earning the right to be here in front of you here today. We did a decent job of that at the beginning with my introduction to help you understand why I'm here and, you know, help you understand why I could help you. The online bugbear, he was cute, right? We talked about some of those top presenter traits and this notion of suggestology. So I'm going to expand on some of these a bit further as we go. So let's go ahead and move on to the 3 most powerful techniques that we can use in an online forum. And it kind of starts with this 10-minute rule. It's absolutely critical. So to maintain the focus and the attention, we've got to pay attention to this attention span issue, right? Absolutely under no circumstances should more than 10 minutes pass before something changes. There's a meaningful interaction. There's a change of state. We can shift our focus. We can go from listening to one person to another. We can go from listening to seeing. We have something to do, meaning typing feedback or speaking up. Maybe we're raising the energy with just saying, hey, you know what, we're going to step away from here for 60 seconds so that you quickly clear your text. If you had any come in that have to get attention, we'll give you 60 seconds to do that, and then we're going to nail it and come right back to it. Build your agenda so that you can create that change of pace, right, that change state to rebuild the energy. Make that happen, right? Try to make it easy for people to see that you've critically thought about that what's in it for me question. If you can prepare for the meeting to be focused on what's important to them on a personal basis, it's going to be really hard for them to avoid being alert. I'd also suggest, who is it you're inviting to this meeting? You know, sometimes we invite people to meetings that really don't have a reason to be there. And without being insulting to them, we could say, you know, we're covering ground here that's really not going to affect you. You're welcome to skip this one. You know, make sure we have a way for them to participate, right? A way for them to help the meeting be successful and help them be involved. And if you can't check that box, rethink who's there, right? And maybe we need to do something different here to keep people mentally engaged. Another great technique that I've used is, you know, if you have people in the room that don't have a role, I'm talking about a virtual room, and if people are in your virtual room that do not have a role, they're much more likely to check out, right? So what I would do, if you're concerned that's a problem, is identify who doesn't have a role and say, you know what, Bill, Sally, and Sam, you're each going to have responsibility at the end of our meeting to give us a recap of what happened today. So Bill, you're going to give us a recap on the first 20 minutes of the meeting. You know, Sally, you've got the second 20 minutes, and then, you know, Bill, you're going to handle the last 20 minutes, and just give us a power recap of what we did, what was decided, and what's next, and any thoughts you would have to improve it. Or, you know, at the end of this meeting, I need Sally and Bill to give 2 ideas about things that we can do to make this meeting more productive next time. Or maybe the top 3 things that are most important to do before we meet next, right? So, hey, you know, I need a little help here at the end to make sure we've captured the important points. How about this person, that person, help us with that, get them to agree, and move on, right? The trick here is to be creative. In every situation, the people involved are going to be different, right? You need to remember that, not lose track of who's there and why, but then the trick is, how do we make sure everybody is somehow involved to keep them focused, right? We've got their attention every step of the way. So that second habit is around the participation thing. So I'm going to drill a little deeper into this now. right? To make sure we truly achieve that full participation, there's several more techniques that we can use here. For example, the enrolling questions technique, which I'll explain in more detail here in a few minutes. Here's some other techniques you might use. If you send out materials in advance, call out on individuals at random at different parts of the meeting, right, to talk about what was going on, right? What are the materials that are there? Can they comment on whether those materials are accurate? Can they weigh in on things like, oh, is this information still current? Is it accurate? Is it important to what we're working on here now? Or is it now not important to us? Or what else should we be considering here, Bob, related to this particular issue? Design your meeting to allow for that pause, no more than every 10 minutes, more often would be better, to ask people at random to comment about certain aspects of what you're talking about here. If you're using the web conference tool, this is where I'd like to use the question or the chat functionality to get people to respond, just like you've been doing here. Using that chat tool, you could use a quick yes or no. You could offer a short closed-end question like ranking on a scale of 1 to 10, how important you think it is that we spend time on this issue. That way you can get very quick consensus about should we just discard this and move on, or is this something we really need to dig into? If you only got a phone for the meeting and no visual cues here, try to design in the activity where each person has to respond to the group in a similar way. Meaning we're going to go round robin here, right? I'm going to call people off one at a time. It's your job to say yes, no, yes, this is the reason why, no, this is the reason why. Here's my number on that scale, and that's why I ranked it that way. Bang, bang, bang. Move through there, and the more random you make it, the better, because you know what, you get there and you say, you know, time out, let's just pause here, let's do a quick round robin, scale of 1 to 10, how important is this and why is that way, and bang, hit everybody. Well, you know, nobody's going to want to sit around there and admit that they weren't paying attention. They're going to be paying attention, and they're going to be participating and helping you keep things moving forward. All right, so I would like to know, time permitting here, let's see here, is there another technique that anybody has used? Let's use that question tool. Is there another technique anybody's used that to add to this, a technique you've used to ensure full participation in an online forum? Can anybody type in a technique that they've used? Games, okay, awesome. Anything else you've used that works in an online forum to keep people connected? Let's keep going. So who can fill in this blank, right? Who can come up with an association word with what we're trying to do? Okay, awesome. Humor, jokes, funny cartoon, trivia questions, the check-ins, okay, humor, yep, awesome. Always use humor, I like that, that's interesting. Keep going. Keeping it moving, prizes, that's interesting. That would be fun to develop. All right, awesome, so I'm just flipping through here some of the other things. Polls, yep, awesome. Good job. Thank you for those suggestions. Very good. All right, so let's move on to technique number 3. Excuse me. I'm going to take a quick sip of the water, and then I'll get into this. Without knowing it, I've used this extensively in today's webinar, and we use this throughout the meeting. It's a great way to increase that buy-in to the process. So, you know, what's an enrolling question? It's usually something with a yes or a no at the end of it, or a number, or something else. It's a great way to get people engaged at the onset and helps you establish control as the facilitator right out of the box. Be very careful here to use pertinent questions that are kind of close-ended, and make sure that there's some kind of physical or mental activity associated with it. Like the raising of the hands in a physical meeting, here we would have a virtual raising of the hands. Could everybody hear what I just said, and were you able to understand it? I need to see a hand, right? Everybody would have to raise their hand in the online forum. Or you could do that round robin if it's just a phone call. Maybe you make people reply verbally or with texting using the question or chat tool like we've done here. The key here, this is the real emphasis, is it's got to be 100% participation to get the full benefit of this. Here's one of my favorite techniques that you can modify to your situation. This is, again, a form of an enrolling question. How many of you agree that X is an issue that we really need to address as a team, followed by How many would say not, right? So everybody in the online forum would answer yes, they agree, and you say great. And how many would say not, right? Don't think this is something we should spend time on. Here's the key. You have to have 100% participation. They don't get off the hook until everybody has weighed in on this. And then maybe you follow in. How many of you are feeling, maybe it's a different one, right? How many of you feel frustrated by this? Yes, yes, yes. Who says no, we're not frustrated? Or, excuse me, who thinks we should not do something about this issue versus who thinks we should? And then look for people to weigh in and make sure you're getting that 100% participation. Again, this is called enrolling questions. There's different ways to hook people into what you're doing and get very useful feedback for you as the facilitator about what's going on. All right, I'm going to let you read this over for a second, and then using the question response tool, I'd like you to try to answer this question yes or no. These methods, to be most powerful, all three of these things that I've just done with you, would you say yes or no to this question? We should integrate them to have full impact, right? They should be interwoven and used continuously. I need a yes or a no, please, while I'm taking a sip of water. Awesome. So I'm getting a preponderance of yeses, but we did have a couple of no's. For those of you who said yes and no or no, would you offer just a quick comment about why maybe no? Why maybe no? I'm interested in feedback because most people feel like we ought to try to integrate the methods, but I was interested in, I would like to get the other point of view as part of my learning and learning from one another. So if you said no or yes or no or not sure, maybe you could just write into that question box. Okay, I must, wait a minute, hang on, I'm going to try to get back here. Must fit in the public and the setting. Okay, ooh, I like it. So this person had a very good observation that culturally, is it appropriate to use all those techniques at the same time? And not all settings lend themselves to using those three techniques like I've been, that's a very good point. Some participants are shy, may not want to participate. So here again, that's back to the culture. What's the acceptable behavior norm in our group, our community? Okay, all right, awesome. So each could be effective independently. You're absolutely right about that. Each of these is truly an effective technique independently. You should definitely use them. I agree with that. And they're very powerful used together. Unless it's a short meeting, you may not have the opportunity to really use these tools as much. And some people might push back, right? They don't want to be quizzed, or they feel like they're being put on the spot or whatever. All right, cool. And then impact doesn't need all of those. Yep, you're right about that. True, very true. Key is to know your audience. Thank you for the feedback. Very, very helpful. And that really makes a good point for all of us, is these are all techniques, these are all methods that we can use to really move the needle in organizations in our leadership. That doesn't mean they're foolproof, and we have to be careful to understand context, the audience, who's in the room, why they're in the room, what's their point of view, what's their agenda, and to just blindly use these without considering who's there, what we're trying to accomplish, the time we have, and all those other things is not really wise. So thank you for that feedback. I'm very grateful, and thank you for those thoughts. All right, awesome. So I'm going to ask for some feedback here. You're going to get a post-webinar questionnaire. And so we've had some discussion about at APICS about potentially putting on a skills program around the same topic. And how that works is we kind of do a pre-workshop survey to gather information on our participants, what they're trying to learn, and then we spend a lot of time breaking down these 22 habits with a series of labs, templates, instructions. We go in great detail for how to prepare for online activities, and then we typically would do like a 2-hour session one week with homework and come back the next week, 2 weeks later, and have people reporting back on what they did and putting some of these skills into practice. And then we would drill into conducting online interactions with mastery and then some of those critical skills. So we'd be like some feedback. I know you'll see that in the post-webinar. We're not going to do it now. But in the post-webinar survey, we'd like to know what your interest might be in participating in something like that in the future. So thank you for allowing me to do that. And then the other thing here I wanted to thank you is my thank you for your time with us here today. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to MetaOps Magazine. You can just go to metaopsmagazine.com. You can download one of my free ebooks, and this is just a monthly, it's really an anthology magazine with the smartest people I know come together and provide their best stuff around this. And for what it's worth, we're continually looking for contributing authors. So if you had an interest in being published, we would certainly welcome that as well. So that's just a little thank you for attending today if you'd like to take advantage of that. And then let's get into wrap-up. So just to kind of get into wrap-up here, you know, what's at stake? And I think, I hope I made the point pretty clearly that 80% of success is often a people issue. And 80% of the solution to getting through to people is who? That's probably us, right? The professionals that are charged with making things happen in our organization to move things forward, to get things done. So there's a ton at stake here. I've seen some data out there that suggests, you know, that 8 or 9 organizations of 10 that fail, that as much as 60% of the causation behind that failure rate really comes down to the individuals who are leading and charged with, at the point of attack, getting people engaged and moving things along. You know, we covered, you know, why that deck is stacked against you, and you know, you're almost dead before you get out of the box in an online forum. You've got so many things working against you, and there's a number of things you can do about it. We talked about the things that people hate most, and I hope you're going to make a promise to yourself that you're never ever going to be guilty again of the 3 things that people hate most. You're just going to cross those off your list. That's not a behavior I'm doing anymore. And they had a chance to share some of those key habits of the best online facilitators, and then we spent some time drilling down into the use of the 3, I'll call them the killer techniques in online meetings that you may or may not be able to bring into play every single time, and you may or may not want to use all 3, you know, concurrently, but there are basic things that we can do that really make a huge difference in getting great results when we're leading online meetings and trying to drive real performance in end-to-end supply chains. So with that, I think I'm ready to push it back over to Jennifer.
Great, thank you so much, Ron, for all these awesome insights. And now we see some time for questions and answers. As a reminder, you can use that questions box on your toolbar, which we know you all know how to use now. So please send in your questions, and we will do our best to answer them for you. And we'll give you a few seconds to go ahead and do that.
Jennifer, while they're doing that, I'm going to fill up my water glass. I'll be right back.
Great, thanks, Ron. While Ron's grabbing water, there is a question here that I can answer. Yes, the presentation will be available to you after the webinar. Everyone who registered, so if you have friends and colleagues who registered but maybe didn't attend, everyone will be getting an email after this word with a link to watch the recording. If you ask about the survey, the survey form will come as you close your webinar. There will be a pop-up with the survey for you, and you'll also get that in that email with that link that I just mentioned. And let's look at your background. Hi.
I am back. Thank you.
Awesome. Our first question comes from Stefan, and he wants to know, what are your views on using video in your online presentations?
Okay, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. How do you feel about using videos in your presentations?
That is a great question. I like using videos in every form I possibly can. What I've found in an online forum, Stefan, is that generally technology is just not going to support you. What I've had some luck with in the past with online forums is I have people go to a YouTube link or something, go offline and watch something offline, like, hey, we're going to take 3 minutes here, it's your job to go off and watch this. I mean, you just don't have the bandwidth to stream that over most desktop conferencing applications. It's just really, really clunky. and I've had pretty good success with that. If you're inside a firewall with larger organizations that have the infrastructure and you can play that video, very powerful. So I highly recommend it, and it's going to be a real challenge technically. I'm hoping that answered the question. You can ask, text, use the question box if you need more clarification on that, Stefan, you just use the question box.
Thanks. And Peggy has a similar question. She wants to know what you think about the video presentations where maybe you'd have a webcam on and you'd be presenting to your audience. Then at least they get the visual cues from you. And is that easier? Is it harder? Is it worth the effort to incorporate that? What do you think?
Again, it's a very good question, and part of it's the forum, part of it's the amount of time you've got to work with. You would also, want the situation to be where it's appropriate that we're doing the video. In other words, there's things on the wall perhaps, maybe they're drawing on a whiteboard and you want to illustrate or kind of build something up in a discussion. That can be very powerful. We just want the person that's doing that's being taped, if you will, or videoed to be very, to have some skills, right? Because you don't want to commit any significant faux pas. And so I think it's a very good idea as long as we thought through carefully that it's appropriate, and you don't want to overdo it, not too much of it for too long without that change of state that I mentioned. In other words, if you went more than 10 minutes without some kind of pause to check in, are they hearing us okay? Do they have feedback on what we're saying, etc.? It's very good. Just make sure it's appropriate in the forum and that technically your audience has the infrastructure, the speed and all the other things to keep up with the video feed. And other than that, I think it's a good technique.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Mitchell, and he wants to know, what should you do when people are trying to talk over each other in the online meeting? I know we have this problem in some of our meetings at APICS where they'll cut off a person who's talking and things like that. And how do you keep the peace and make sure everybody gets to say what they need to say?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And the technology you're using can really be a challenge sometimes where there's like a lag between one person speaking and the next, and there could be a lag where I'm sitting over here on another line and I think Bob stopped speaking when in fact it was just a lag. So I start to talk and it goes over the top. So if I'm the facilitator and I suspect it's a technology issue, then I would strongly recommend going with a round robin. In other words, you know what? Because we tend to have issues with talking over one another because technology is not serving us well, we're going to do round robin. I'm going to hit everybody in order, or you're going to raise your hand or whatever, right? And they just go in order, and then our job is to listen to that. If it's more of a behavior problem, I would recommend creating a code of honor. And what I mean by that is, in most organizations, they have some kind of rules of the road for which we're going to operate. And maybe I would, if you don't have a code of honor, a general written and understood behavior around talking over one another, then as the facilitator, you might say, you know what, let's just pause for a minute and talk about how we want to manage our meeting together. And let's talk about how we want to handle this talking over one another thing. Looking for suggestions. Do we want to do it in a round robin? Do we want to, have a rule that you have to wait 15 seconds until somebody is exactly 15 seconds or 10 seconds, pick a number. You have to wait X amount of time for somebody to pause before you break in, and add comments. A lot of that's the facilitator's fault too, because we can say, hey, who has an idea about that? Well, of course 4 or 5 people want to start talking about it. Well, what do you think is going to happen? Or if it's particularly an inflammatory thing where people are going to be very, very emotional about it, as a facilitator, you might want to see that comment and say, wait a minute, this is likely to spark some real discussion. Let's do a little round robin here. The other thing is if you've got technology challenges, sometimes it would mute everybody, and then one at a time I would unmute people in an online forum, because as a presenter using tools like GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar, you can have everybody muted as the facilitator, and then you can unmute them one at a time, right, and kind of force the discipline around it that way, and only unmute people that are empowered to speak at the time and ask other people to raise their hands. So that's kind of a lengthy answer to a simple question, but I hope you got some nuggets out of there that'll help you.
Those are some good nuggets, actually. And it kind of ties into Jeff's question here. He wants to know how you can handle some meeting participants who are just there to disrupt your meeting. They're talking on things that aren't on topic. They're just dropping in to give their opinion and interrupt just to be heard. How should you handle those people?
That is a behavior situation. So if I heard the question correctly, we've got people that are literally gaming us. Is that what I'm hearing, Jennifer?
It sounds like it. They're just, interrupting to derail you a little bit or, insert their own agenda.
Yeah, I would, well, first of all, I'll go back to, do we have a behavior, an agreement about behavior? And if you don't have an agreement around behavior, as a facilitator, that's something you should do. And that usually would involve, at the very beginning in your very first meeting with the group, is you literally say, let's talk about behaviors that support us being successful at getting things done in this online forum. You make a list of those, and you talk about things that get in the way, that block our performance, right? Get in the way of our success. Make sure that the unfavorable behaviors include things like being snarky and sarcastic or interrupting or getting off topic. Make sure those get into, we don't do those behaviors. And then you lead the group through a consensual agreement that we agree we are specifically engaging in the positive behaviors that support success in our online meeting, and we're deliberately, and we agree we are not behaving and engaging in the negative behaviors. And if you do that, which is painful, by the way, I'm not saying that's easy, but if you've done that, you now have something you can type up, distribute, make part of the agenda, an addendum to the agenda, or put it up on the screen or whatever you need to do. And you can, as is the behavior when it happens, Bill, I know you don't mean to get us off track here, but that doesn't sound like it's on topic. Can you tell us why that's, lined up with the topic that we're talking about? And they're either going to have to bring it in line or they're going to have to move on. That's a couple of ideas I've got. It's a behavior thing, and if people feel like they've already agreed to certain behavior and they start to break the rules, then it gives you the right as a facilitator to call them out. And if they're really keeping it up, it gives you the opportunity to take it upstream and maybe even get a little intervention going from your leadership as the need may be. So again, sorry for a long-winded answer to a simple question, but you have to distinguish between just ignorance, right, or if it's malicious. In both cases, having a little rules of the road thing, a code of honor that everybody's agreed to up front, very helpful, and then use the facilitator. You get to use that as your tool to bring them back on track. Maybe you use a parking lot. That's the technique where you have a place to capture off-topic things, and you say, Bill, really appreciate that point of view. I'm going to put that in the parking lot, and then we'll either take that offline or add that to the agenda for our next meeting, and then you move on. So there's several techniques in there I think could be helpful.
Great, thanks, Ron. I think we have time for one more question, and this one comes from Jasmine, and she wants to know, what's the best way to make sure people are not multitasking during your meeting?
Yeah, I love that one. That's a good one. We covered a number of techniques on that today, and I think I've got like at least 4 things popping into my head. I've said it already a couple times. First thing I would do is make that part of a code of honor. If you don't go into this with some kind of agreed upon behavior set that the company has published or you've done with the group, I would make that part of your code of honor you're going to do with your group, saying, let's make a list of the things we're agreeing we're not going to do to get the most out of these meetings. And as a facilitator, you make sure multitasking is the no-no. It's a specific no-no. We don't do that because we're going to design our meetings to be useful, to actually get things done, and to do that efficiently with respecting everybody's time. This is how we're going to behave. Okay, so that's a good one, because then it gives you a license to call people out. In some cases, they can actually control each other. Let's just say you got 3 people sitting in a room attending your online meeting. Guess what? 1 or 2 people in that room are going to kick the other one in the knee and say, wait a minute, what are you doing, man? We said we were going to pay attention and keep them on track. I would specifically request then, as we got into the meeting, that we're going to make that a point, right? As we start up the meeting, I said I want to remind everybody that we're going to be keeping this meeting to X number of minutes. We have these things on the agenda, and we've already agreed we're not going to be multitasking. So I need everybody to raise their hand to say yes or whatever, that we're not going to be doing multitasking. We're going to stay focused. And then another technique I've used, it can be embarrassing to people, but they have to get over it, is I would just randomly ask questions. So if I suspect I've got that problem going on, I would just stop and say, hey, Bill, do I have that information correct? Or, hey, Bill, do you see a different point of view on that? Or, Bill, tell me, is that information current and up to date? And if it's silent for 60 seconds because Bill's off doing something else, Bill's not going to like being found out, right, that, they're not paying attention, or worse, they give some goofy answer that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Everybody's going to know it. And then if you have a code of honor about multitasking, guess what you're empowered to do? You can go circle back to the individual after the fact and say, look, I know, things come up and you're really busy, but, I thought we all agreed that as part of this group that we were going to dedicate ourselves to getting things done. Is there something going on I need to know about, right? Maybe they need to be excused from the meetings for a while, or maybe they shouldn't be in the meeting, and that's why they're multitasking, which is our fault for not thinking it through. So it's good to get at the root cause. If you're in a company that has a really bad cultural habit of multitasking, that's going to be a tight fight. And the best way I'd go after it is, promising to keep things tight and getting quick results in meetings, and basically, changing a behavior set around that. And then maybe lastly I would add is the behavior. I might say something like, I'm getting the sense here a number of us are multitasking and not really keeping up with what we're doing. Do we need to speed this meeting up? Right? Just ask the question. Say, is this meeting going too slow and you feel like you should multitask because you're bored? And to ask people to respond to that. Or, you know what, a lot of people are multitasking. We're obviously not doing something right here. Does anybody have a suggestion about what we can do to make this meeting more productive and reduce the tendency to multitask? Do some problem solving on the spot. What is it we could do differently or better to make this a better experience for you? So long-winded answer, but I think there's some pieces there that should help.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ron, for your time and all of these great insights. Before we check out, I just wanted to read that there are a couple of compliments here about how your presentation is very engaging and people like the audience participation aspect. So thank you for bringing that to us today. And to our participants, thanks for joining us today. This concludes today's edition of APICS Extra Live. Please mark your calendars. Our next APICS Extra Live will be February 16th, and you can register for that online. It's not available just yet, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks that'll be online so you can officially sign up for that one, and we'll see you in February then. Also, just as a friendly reminder, please take some time to fill out our quick survey. I think it's only 5 or 6 questions, so it shouldn't take you very long. It'll pop up as you leave the webinar, and then also in a follow-up email if you forget to do it after the webinar. All content and materials included in this edition of APICS Extra Live are the property of APICS and are protected by the United States and international copyright laws. All rights are reserved. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.